The morning sun cast long shadows across the cobblestone courtyard of Buckingham Palace as tourists gathered behind the ornate iron gates. Among the crowd stood 12-year-old Emma Thompson, her small hand gripping her mother's coat sleeve as they watched the famous changing of the guard ceremony. What started as an exciting family vacation to London would soon become a nightmare that would test the limits of human compassion and duty. Emma had been looking forward to this trip for months. Her parents, Sarah and Michael Thompson, had saved for 2 years to bring their family to England. Emma's younger brother Jake bounced excitedly beside her, pointing at the red uniformed guards with their tall black hats. The pageantry was everything Emma had imagined from the movies and documentaries she had watched back home in Ohio. But something was terribly wrong that morning, something that would make this ordinary tourist moment extraordinary. Emma felt increasingly dizzy and weak, her vision blurring as she tried to focus on the magnificent spectacle before her. She had been feeling unwell for several days, but her parents attributed it to travel fatigue and excitement. The symptoms had been subtle at first: a slight fever, some nausea, fatigue that seemed more than just tiredness from sightseeing. As the ceremony began, Emma's condition rapidly deteriorated. Her breathing became shallow and labored, and a cold sweat broke out across her forehead despite the cool London morning. Her mother, busy taking photographs and managing an excited Jake, didn't immediately notice Emma's distress. The crowd around them was thick and noisy, everyone pushing forward to get better views of the guards. Emma tried to speak to tell her mother something was wrong, but her voice came out as barely a whisper. The noise of the crowd, the military, band playing, and the general excitement drowned out her weak attempts to call for help. Panic began to set in as she realized her parents couldn't hear her over the commotion. She felt herself becoming weaker by the minute, her legs beginning to shake as she struggled to remain standing. It was then that Emma noticed one of the Queen's Guard standing at attention near the palace gates. Guard James Morrison had been serving in the prestigious unit for 3 years, and he took immense pride in his role protecting the royal family and maintaining the dignity of the ceremony. He was trained to remain perfectly still and silent during his duty, no matter what distractions occurred around him, but something in his peripheral vision caught his attention. Through years of training, Morrison had developed an acute awareness of his surroundings, able to detect unusual movements or potential threats while maintaining his rigid stance. What he saw was a young girl in the crowd who appeared to be in distress, her movements becoming increasingly erratic as she swayed slightly. Emma, growing more desperate and feeling her strength ebbing away, remembered something she had learned in a safety class at school about getting help when you can't speak loudly. With tremendous effort, she began to wave her arms in small, deliberate motions, trying to catch the attention of anyone who might help her. Her movements were weak but persistent, a silent plea for assistance that she hoped someone would notice. Morrison's trained eyes immediately recognized that something was amiss. Despite his strict orders to remain motionless during the ceremony, his human instincts told him that a child was in serious trouble. The girl's pale complexion and the way she was moving suggested a medical emergency rather than simple excitement or misbehavior. The guard faced an impossible decision. Breaking protocol during a royal ceremony could result in severe disciplinary action, possibly ending his military career. The Queen's Guard are expected to maintain their posts regardless of distractions, weather conditions, or minor disturbances. Their unwavering discipline and dedication to duty are legendary worldwide. However, Morrison could see that the situation was escalating. The young girl appeared to be on the verge of collapse, and her family seemed completely unaware of her condition. Every instinct in his body told him that immediate action was necessary, even if it meant violating his sacred duty to remain at his post. As Emma's vision began to tunnel and she felt herself beginning to faint, she made one last desperate attempt to signal for help. Using the last of her strength, she raised both arms above her head and waved them frantically. Her eyes locked on the red uniformed guard who seemed to be looking in her direction. The crowd continued to surge around her, everyone focused on the ceremony and completely oblivious to the medical crisis unfolding in their midst. Emma's parents were still several feet away, their attention divided between the spectacle and managing Jake's excitement. Time seemed to slow down as Emma felt consciousness slipping away from her. Morrison made his decision in that crucial moment, knowing that a child's life was potentially at stake. What happened next would not only save Emma's life, but would also demonstrate that sometimes the most important duty is the one that comes from the heart, rather than from a rule book. Guard Morrison did something that shocked everyone present at Buckingham Palace that morning. In full view of hundreds of tourists, television cameras, and his superior officers, he broke formation and stepped out of his assigned position. The collective gasp from the crowd was audible as the seemingly impossible happened. A Queen's Guard abandoned his post during an active ceremony. Morrison moved with purposeful determination through the crowd, his tall frame and distinctive red uniform creating a path as confused tourists stepped aside. His actions caused immediate commotion among the other guards and palace officials who witnessed the unprecedented breach of protocol. Several guards exchanged glances, uncertain whether they should maintain their positions or respond to what appeared to be an emergency situation. Within seconds, Morrison reached Emma just as her knees buckled and she began to collapse. His strong arms caught her before she hit the hard cobblestones, cradling the unconscious girl with surprising gentleness, for someone trained primarily in military precision. The crowd around them fell silent, suddenly realizing that something serious was happening beyond the planned ceremony. Emma's mother, Sarah, turned at that moment to check on her daughter and was horrified to see her child unconscious in the arms of a Queen's Guard. Her scream pierced through the morning air, immediately drawing the attention of everyone nearby. Michael Thompson pushed through the crowd, his face pale with fear as he saw his daughter's limp form. Morrison, still holding Emma securely, began shouting orders with the authority his position commanded. His military training kicked in as he directed tourists to step back and give them space while simultaneously calling for medical assistance. His voice carried across the courtyard with such commanding presence that even palace officials immediately began coordinating an emergency response. The palace's emergency medical team, always on standby during public events, responded within minutes. Dr. Elizabeth Hayes, the on-duty physician, quickly assessed Emma's condition while Morrison continued to support her. The doctor's immediate examination revealed critically low blood sugar levels and signs of severe dehydration, conditions that could have been life-threatening if left untreated much longer. As medical personnel took over Emma's care, the full impact of Morrison's decision became apparent. Palace officials approached him with stern expressions, clearly prepared to address his breach of protocol. Breaking formation during a royal ceremony was considered one of the most serious violations a guard could commit, potentially resulting in immediate dismissal and disgrace. However, something unexpected happened that would change everything. As Emma was being prepared for transport to the nearest hospital, she regained consciousness for a brief moment. Her first words, spoken weakly but clearly enough for everyone nearby to hear, were directed at Morrison. "Thank you for seeing me when no one else did." The impact of those simple words rippled through the crowd of officials and onlookers. Here was concrete proof that Morrison's actions had indeed been necessary and life-saving. The girl herself was acknowledging that his intervention had made the difference between life and death. The situation suddenly shifted from a disciplinary matter to a recognition of heroic action. Dr. Hayes confirmed what everyone was beginning to understand. Emma had been experiencing a severe hypoglycemic episode, likely triggered by an underlying diabetic condition that had not yet been diagnosed. Without immediate medical intervention, she could have slipped into a diabetic coma or worse. Morrison's quick thinking and willingness to break protocol had literally saved her life. Emma's parents were overwhelmed with gratitude and relief as they accompanied their daughter to the hospital. Sarah Thompson, tears streaming down her face, grabbed Morrison's hand before the ambulance departed. Her words came out in a rush of emotion. "You saved my baby's life. I don't know how we can ever thank you enough." The incident quickly gained attention beyond the immediate crowd. Tourists who had witnessed the events began sharing their accounts on social media, and news reporters present for the ceremony realized they had stumbled upon a much more significant story than the routine changing of the guard. Palace officials found themselves in an unprecedented situation. On one hand, they had to uphold the strict discipline and protocol that made the Queen's Guard respected worldwide. On the other hand, they were dealing with a clear case of heroic action that had saved a child's life. The decision of how to handle Morrison's breach of protocol would set an important precedent. As news of the incident spread throughout the palace hierarchy, It reached the attention of senior royal officials who would ultimately decide Morrison's fate. The story was already beginning to capture public attention, with early social media posts praising the guard's humanity and quick thinking. The palace found itself managing both a potential disciplinary issue and a growing public relations situation. Meanwhile, at the hospital, doctors confirmed Dr. Hayes's initial assessment. Emma was diagnosed with type 1 diabetes, a condition that had been developing for weeks without proper recognition. Her family learned that the symptoms they had attributed to travel stress were actually warning signs of a serious medical condition that required immediate and ongoing treatment. The medical team explained that Emma's condition that morning had been critical. The combination of undiagnosed diabetes, travel stress, and irregular eating patterns had created a perfect storm that could have resulted in a diabetic coma. Morrison's intervention had come at exactly the right moment, when minutes could have made the difference between recovery and tragedy. As Emma stabilized in the hospital, the focus returned to Buckingham Palace, where officials were grappling with how to respond to Morrison's actions. The guard himself remained silent about his decision, simply stating that he had acted according to his conscience when he saw a child in distress. The news of Guard Morrison's heroic act spread like wildfire across London and beyond. By afternoon, major news outlets were reporting the story of the Queen's Guard who broke centuries of protocol to save a young American girl's life. Social media exploded with videos taken by tourists who had witnessed the dramatic events, showing Morrison's decisive action and Emma's rescue. Public reaction was overwhelmingly positive and emotional. Comments poured in from around the world praising Morrison's humanity and courage. Many people shared their own stories of medical emergencies and praised the Guard for putting human life above rigid rules. The hashtag #ChopperHeroGuard began trending internationally as people celebrated his quick thinking and compassion. However, behind the scenes at Buckingham Palace, the situation was far more complex. Senior officers in the Queen's Guard were meeting to discuss the unprecedented breach of protocol. Colonel William Hartley, commanding officer of the regiment, faced a difficult decision that would impact not only Morrison's career but also the future standards of conduct for all royal guards. The Queen's Guard had maintained their reputation for unwavering discipline for hundreds of years. Their ability to remain motionless and focused regardless of distractions was legendary and considered essential to their role in protecting the royal family. Breaking this tradition, even for noble reasons, created concerns about setting a precedent that could compromise their effectiveness. Morrison was called to report to his commanding officers that evening. As he stood at attention in the oak-paneled office, he knew his military career hung in the balance. Colonel Hartley reviewed the events of the morning, acknowledging that while Morrison's intentions were clearly admirable, his actions had violated fundamental protocols that every guard swore to uphold. The interrogation was thorough but respectful. Morrison explained his decision-making process, describing how he had recognized the signs of medical distress and made a split-second judgment that a child's life was in immediate danger. He accepted full responsibility for his actions and expressed no regrets about his choice, even knowing the potential consequences. Meanwhile, at the hospital, Emma was responding well to treatment. Her blood sugar levels had stabilized, and doctors were working with her family to establish a long-term diabetes management plan. The diagnosis, while serious, was manageable with proper medication and lifestyle adjustments. Emma was incredibly fortunate that her condition had been identified before more severe complications developed. Emma's parents spent the day fielding calls from reporters and well-wishers who had heard about their daughter's rescue. The Thompson family was amazed by the outpouring of support and concern from complete strangers around the world. They repeatedly expressed their gratitude for Morrison's intervention and their hope that he would not face punishment for saving their daughter. Dr. Hayes, who had treated Emma at the scene, provided a detailed medical report to palace officials. Her assessment confirmed that Emma's condition had been immediately life-threatening, and that Morrison's quick action had prevented a potential tragedy. The doctor's professional opinion carried significant weight in the ongoing discussions about how to handle the situation. As evening approached, an unexpected development changed everything. Palace officials received a personal message from a senior member of the royal family who had been following the day's events. The message expressed admiration for Morrison's actions and suggested that true loyalty to the crown included protecting innocent people, especially children when they were in danger. This royal intervention shifted the entire conversation about Morrison's fate. Instead of focusing solely on the breach of protocol, officials began considering how to honor both military discipline and humanitarian values. The challenge became finding a way to acknowledge Morrison's heroism while maintaining the essential standards that made the Queen's Guard effective. Public pressure continued to mount throughout the day. Petitions began circulating online calling for Morrison to be honored rather than punished. News interviews with security experts and former military personnel generally supported his decision, arguing that saving a life should always take precedence over ceremonial protocol. Emma's story also resonated with diabetes advocacy groups, who used the incident to raise awareness about the warning signs of type 1 diabetes in children. Medical professionals praised the chain of events that led to Emma's diagnosis, noting that many children with undiagnosed diabetes face much more serious health consequences. The Thompson family's insurance and medical bills were being handled by an outpouring of donations from people who had been touched by the story. The family was overwhelmed by the generosity of strangers and repeatedly stated that they hoped Morrison would be recognized as a hero rather than disciplined as a rule breaker. Late that evening, Colonel Hartley received orders to report to the highest levels of palace administration the following morning. The decision about Morrison's future would be made by officials with direct connections to the royal family itself. The unprecedented nature of the situation required input from the very top of the royal hierarchy. Morrison spent the night uncertain about his future, but at peace with his decision. He had joined the Queen's Guard to serve and protect, and he believed that protecting Emma had been the ultimate expression of those values. Whether his career survived or not, he knew he had acted according to his deepest principles. The story continued to evolve as international media picked up the account. News programs around the world featured the dramatic footage of Morrison breaking formation and catching Emma as she collapsed. The image of the stoic guard cradling the unconscious child became an iconic representation of humanity, triumphing over rigid rules. As the first day ended, it was clear that Morrison's split-second decision had created ripple effects far beyond saving one young girl's life. The incident was forcing a reevaluation of what it truly meant to serve with honor and distinction in one of the world's most prestigious military units. The next morning brought an extraordinary turn of events that no one could have predicted. Colonel Hartley was summoned to an emergency meeting with palace officials, where he learned that the royal family had been personally following Emma's story throughout the night. The decision about Morrison's fate would not be made in a standard military disciplinary hearing, but would instead involve the highest levels of royal authority. Morrison reported for duty that morning, not knowing whether he would be facing court-martial proceedings or commendation. The uncertainty was weighing heavily on all the guards, who understood that their colleagues' situation could affect the entire regiment's future protocols. The morning ceremony proceeded normally, but there was a palpable tension among the guards and officials. At the hospital, Emma was feeling much stronger and asking repeatedly about the Red Soldier who had helped her. Her parents had explained what Morrison had done and the potential trouble he might face because of his decision to help her. Emma, despite being only 12 years old, was deeply troubled by the idea that someone might be punished for saving her life. Dr. Hayes continued monitoring Emma's condition and was pleased with her rapid improvement. The medical team had successfully stabilized her blood sugar levels and begun educating the family about diabetes management. However, the doctor remained firm in her assessment that without Morrison's intervention, Emma could have suffered permanent damage or worse from her untreated condition. Media coverage intensified throughout the morning as more details emerged about the incident. International news networks were now covering the story, with many framing it as a test of whether ancient traditions could adapt to modern humanitarian values. Public opinion remained overwhelmingly supportive of Morrison's actions. The breakthrough came at precisely 10 o'clock that morning. Palace officials announced that Morrison had been requested to attend a private audience with a senior member of the royal family. This was virtually unprecedented for a guard who had technically violated protocol, and speculation immediately began about what this meeting might mean for his future. Morrison was escorted through parts of Buckingham Palace that most guards never see, into the private quarters where the royal family conducts personal business. He was instructed to wear his full dress uniform, adding to the formality and mystery of the occasion. The gravity of the moment was not lost on anyone involved. The private audience lasted nearly an hour, during which Morrison was able to explain his actions directly to royal authority. He described seeing Emma's distress, recognizing the medical emergency and making the split-second decision to prioritize her life over protocol. His account was clear, honest, and demonstrated no regret for his choices. During the meeting, Morrison learned something that shocked him. The royal family had been receiving updates about Emma's condition throughout the previous day and night. They had personally expressed concern for her recovery and had been following the medical reports from the hospital. The human element of the story had resonated at the highest levels of the monarchy. What emerged from this private audience would change everything. Instead of disciplinary action, Morrison was informed that his actions were being viewed as exemplifying the highest ideals of service to the crown and the people. The royal perspective was that protecting innocent life, especially that of a child, represented the very essence of what the Queen's Guard was meant to accomplish. The official announcement came that afternoon and stunned everyone following the story. Not only would Morrison face no disciplinary action, but he was being personally commended for his quick thinking and courageous service. The commendation would be formally presented in a special ceremony acknowledging his heroic actions. Even more surprising was the announcement that the incident would lead to a review and potential revision of the Queen's Guard protocols. While maintaining their legendary discipline and focus, new guidelines would be developed to address situations where immediate intervention might be necessary to save lives. Morrison's actions would become the foundation for these humanitarian exceptions to traditional protocol. Emma's family received word of these developments while still at the hospital. Sarah Thompson broke down in tears of relief and joy, knowing that the man who saved her daughter's life would be honored rather than punished. The family immediately expressed their desire to personally thank Morrison and witness his commendation ceremony. The news sent shockwaves through the international community and sparked discussions about the balance between tradition and compassion in institutions worldwide. Morrison's story became a symbol of how even the most rigid systems could adapt and evolve when human values demanded it. Morrison himself was overwhelmed by the turn of events. He had prepared for the worst-case scenario, and instead found himself being celebrated as a hero by the very institution he thought he had disappointed. The support from the royal family validated his decision in ways he had never imagined possible. The broader implications of the incident began to emerge as military and security experts worldwide analyzed what had happened. Morrison's actions were being studied as an example of how training and instinct could work together to achieve the best possible outcomes in crisis situations. Palace officials began working on the formal commendation ceremony, which would include Emma and her family as honored guests. The event would serve multiple purposes: recognizing Morrison's heroism, celebrating Emma's recovery, and demonstrating the monarchy's commitment to evolving with the times while maintaining core values. As the day progressed, more details emerged about the new protocols being developed. The Queen's Guard would receive additional training in recognizing medical emergencies and would have clear guidelines for when humanitarian intervention superseded ceremonial duties. Morrison's experience would be used to train future generations of guards. The story had evolved from a simple medical emergency into a landmark moment in the history of one of the world's most traditional military units. Morrison's split-second decision to save Emma's life had triggered changes that would affect the Queen's Guard for generations to come, proving that sometimes breaking the rules was the most honorable thing a person could do. 3 days after the incident, Emma was cleared to leave the hospital. Her diabetes was now well controlled with medication, and her family had received comprehensive training on managing her condition. As they prepared to return to their hotel, Emma made a special request that would create another unforgettable moment in this extraordinary story. Emma asked if she could personally thank Guard Morrison before her family returned to America. The 12-year-old girl felt a deep connection to the man who had saved her life and wanted to express her gratitude face to face. Her parents immediately contacted palace officials to see if such a meeting could be arranged. The palace response was immediate and positive. Not only would Emma be allowed to meet Morrison, but the encounter would take place as part of his formal commendation ceremony. The royal family had decided that Emma's presence at the ceremony would make the event even more meaningful and would demonstrate the real-world impact of Morrison's courageous decision. Preparations for the ceremony began immediately. The event would take place in the palace courtyard where the original incident had occurred, creating a powerful symbolic connection between Morrison's moment of crisis and his recognition for heroism. Media from around the world requested permission to cover the ceremony, understanding its historical significance. Morrison spent the days leading up to the ceremony receiving congratulations from fellow guards, superior officers, and even members of the public who recognized him on the street. The transformation from potential disciplinary case to celebrated hero was still difficult for him to fully comprehend. He remained humble about his actions, consistently stating that any decent person would have done the same thing. The Thompson family used their remaining days in London to learn more about diabetes management and to prepare Emma for the ceremony. Emma was excited but nervous about meeting Morrison again, especially in such a formal setting. She practiced what she wanted to say to thank him properly for saving her life. Dr. Hayes, who had treated Emma at the scene, was also invited to attend the ceremony. Her medical expertise and professional assessment of the situation had played a crucial role in validating Morrison's actions. The doctor was honored to be included in recognizing what she considered a perfect example of how quick thinking could save lives. The day of the ceremony dawned bright and clear, creating perfect conditions for the outdoor event. Media crews set up their equipment while palace officials made final preparations for what was being called one of the most unique commendation ceremonies in royal history. The combination of military tradition and human drama had captured worldwide attention. Emma arrived at the palace wearing a special dress her mother had bought for the occasion. Despite her young age, she understood the importance of the day and was determined to represent her family and her gratitude with dignity. Her parents were nervous but proud as they prepared to witness their daughter participate in this historic moment. The ceremony began with traditional military pageantry, but the atmosphere was different from typical royal events. There was an emotional undercurrent as everyone present understood they were witnessing something unprecedented. The formal recognition of humanitarian action over strict protocol represented a meaningful evolution in royal tradition. When Morrison was called forward to receive his commendation, the crowd fell silent. He stood at attention as the citation was read, detailing his quick recognition of a medical emergency and his courageous decision to prioritize human life over ceremonial duty. The words carried extra weight because everyone knew how close Emma had come to a tragic outcome. Then came the moment everyone had been waiting for. Emma was invited to step forward and present Morrison with a personal gift from her family. Walking carefully in her formal dress, the young girl approached the guard who had saved her life. The contrast between the small child and the tall, imposing figure in his red uniform created a powerful visual that would be remembered for years to come. Emma's voice was clear and strong as she spoke directly to Morrison. She thanked him not just for saving her life, but for caring enough about a stranger to risk his own career. Her words were simple but profound, expressing a maturity beyond her years as she acknowledged the sacrifice he had been willing to make for her. The gift Emma presented was a handmade card created by her entire elementary school class back in Ohio. When news of her rescue had reached her school, her classmates had worked together to create a tribute to Morrison. The card contained dozens of messages from children thanking him for being a real-life hero and for showing them that sometimes doing the right thing meant being brave enough to break rules. Morrison's composure finally cracked as he read some of the messages from Emma's classmates. The emotional impact of seeing how his actions had inspired children thousands of miles away was overwhelming. For the first time since the incident began, the stoic guard showed visible emotion as he knelt down to Emma's level to properly thank her. The ceremony concluded with Morrison receiving his formal commendation and Emma being recognized as an honorary friend of the Queen's Guard. The unusual designation was created specifically for this occasion, acknowledging her role in helping to reform and improve the Guard's protocols. She was presented with a miniature guard's hat as a symbol of this special relationship. As the formal proceedings ended, something beautiful and spontaneous occurred. The other guards who had witnessed Morrison's actions stepped forward to congratulate both him and Emma. What had started as a breach of protocol had become a moment of unity and pride for the entire regiment. They had all learned something important about the true meaning of their service. The international media coverage of the ceremony was extensive and overwhelmingly positive. The images of Morrison kneeling to speak with Emma, and of the young girl presenting her school's gift to her hero, became iconic photographs that would be remembered long after the news cycle moved on to other stories. Emma's family prepared to return to America the next day, but they knew their connection to Morrison and the Queen's Guard would last forever. The incident had created bonds that transcended nationality and circumstance, proving that human kindness and courage could create lasting relationships even in the most unlikely situations. 6 months after the incident that changed both their lives, Morrison and Emma maintained a correspondence that had grown into a genuine friendship. Emma sent regular updates about her diabetes management and her life back in Ohio, while Morrison shared stories about his continued service with the Queen's Guard and the changes that had been implemented in their protocols. The new guidelines Morrison had helped inspire were officially adopted by the Queen's Guard and became known as the Emma Protocol. This revolutionary policy allowed guards to break formation when they identified immediate threats to life and safety, particularly involving children or elderly individuals. The protocol included specific training on recognizing medical emergencies and proper response procedures. Morrison became an instructor for the new emergency response training, sharing his experience with incoming guards and teaching them to balance traditional discipline with humanitarian awareness. His story was now part of the official training curriculum, ensuring that future guards would be prepared to make similar life-saving decisions when necessary. Emma's diabetes diagnosis, while initially frightening for her family, had led to a much healthier lifestyle and increased awareness of the condition. She became a young advocate for diabetes education in her school and community, sharing her story to help other children and families recognize the warning signs. Her experience at Buckingham Palace had given her a platform to make a positive impact. The Thompson family established a small scholarship fund for children with diabetes who wanted to travel but faced financial barriers due to their medical needs. They named it the Morrison-Emma Friendship Fund, honoring both the guard who saved their daughter and the experience that had brought so much meaning to their lives. Dr. Hayes continued her work at the Palace Medical Facility but often reflected on how Morrison's quick action had demonstrated the importance of having trained observers in public spaces. She collaborated with palace officials to improve emergency medical protocols for all royal events, ensuring that similar situations would be handled even more effectively in the future. The story's impact extended far beyond the individuals directly involved. Military units around the world began examining their own protocols to ensure that humanitarian concerns could be addressed without compromising security or discipline. Morrison's actions had sparked a global conversation about the balance between following orders and following conscience. Tourism to Buckingham Palace increased significantly in the months following the incident, with many visitors specifically hoping to see the location where Morrison had saved Emma's life. Palace officials created a small informational display about the incident and the resulting protocol changes, turning the story into an educational opportunity about evolution and adaptation in traditional institutions. Morrison's military career not only survived his breach of protocol, but flourished because of it. He was promoted to a training position and eventually became one of the most respected instructors in the Queen's Guard. His experience demonstrated that true leadership sometimes required the courage to act against convention when lives were at stake. Emma's annual medical checkups continued to show excellent diabetes management, and her doctors credited the early diagnosis resulting from Morrison's intervention with preventing potential long-term complications. The timing of her rescue had been crucial for her long-term health outcomes, making Morrison's split-second decision even more significant. On the first anniversary of the incident, Emma and her family returned to London for a private celebration with Morrison and palace officials. The reunion was emotional and joyful, celebrating not just Emma's continued health but also the positive changes that had resulted from their chance encounter. The young girl had grown taller and more confident, while Morrison had gained new purpose in his military service. The anniversary visit included a private tour of areas of Buckingham Palace normally closed to the public, a gesture of gratitude from the royal family for both Morrison's service and Emma's role in inspiring positive change. Emma was particularly fascinated by the history and traditions of the palace, understanding now how significant it was that those traditions had evolved partly because of her experience. During their reunion, Morrison and Emma planted a small tree in a palace garden as a symbol of growth and positive change emerging from crisis. The ceremony was private and meaningful, representing how their unexpected meeting had created lasting bonds and beneficial transformations for many people. As Emma and her family prepared to return home after their anniversary visit, they reflected on how a medical emergency that could have been tragic had instead become a story of hope, courage, and positive change. Morrison's willingness to risk his career for a stranger's child had created ripple effects that would benefit countless future visitors to the palace. The story of Morrison and Emma became a lasting reminder that the most important rules are often unwritten ones about human decency and compassion. Morrison's decision to catch a falling child had not only saved her life but had also demonstrated that true honor comes from knowing when protocol should give way to humanity. Emma returned to Ohio with renewed appreciation for the kindness of strangers and the importance of helping others when they cannot help themselves. Morrison continued his service with the Queen's Guard, knowing that his moment of decision had created a legacy that would protect other children for generations to come. Their story lived on in the training manuals of the Queen's Guard, in Emma's continued advocacy for diabetes awareness, and in the memories of everyone who witnessed how a young girl's silent signal for help had been answered by a guard who chose compassion over convention. It remained a powerful testament to the idea that sometimes the most heroic thing someone can do is simply care enough about another person to act when action is needed most.